knows about the gene keys? Raise your hand if you know about the gene keys. Okay, for those of you that don't know about the gene keys, he's going to dive into it, but something that's really starting to show up in community and in all these different places. And let's give a warm welcome to Dan Regan.
Can I get a show of hands who knows about the gene keys and is exploring the gene keys? Yeah, and who doesn't know about the gene keys and hasn't gone near it? Cool. Anyone in the audience who is actively studying their Venus sequence? Nice work. Yeah. So, as humans, we're made up of this substance known as deoxyribonucleic acid, or DNA. And the fascinating thing about this DNA is that inside our bodies there are coils upon coils upon coils of this superfine, microscopic, coded, molded DNA strands. And if we were to unwind it all and lay it all out, it would stretch out to almost 1 billion miles in length. Mind-blowing to say the least, but that's precisely what we're made up of. Now, if we compact all of that data and information into our bodies, that's exactly what we are. We are walking, talking data fields. And we are literally coded to play specific things out in our realities. Specific behavior patterns, the way our auric fields are interacting with the environment, our different mental and emotional defense mechanisms, all of our shadows and all of our gifts. It's all in there. And this is what the gene keys are. They are keys for our genes to literally unlock, activate, and reprogram that data coding that we have stacked inside our vehicles. And this information and this transmission is based primarily on the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching, which is 5,000-year-old ancient wisdom that's rocked up at this exact time in humanity's evolution to assist to wake us up and recalibrate that which wasn't ready to be recalibrated and activated before. So it's a hugely special transmission that is a real gift to humanity. And the big reason that it's part of that is because it makes us aware of our shadow patterns and what our unconscious defensive mechanisms are that cause us to play out certain things, and all of our self-sabotaging and dysfunctional behavior patterns are all coming from this unconscious place. And most of this imprinting comes from the first 3 7-year cycles of our lives, physically, emotionally, and mentally in these 7-year cycles. And we shut down to protect ourselves from the world. We shut down physically in the first 7 years, emotionally in the second 7 years, and mentally in the third 7 years just to survive. So these shadow mechanisms are just coping mechanisms for coming into the world and not knowing how to handle what's coming up and defending ourselves, which we had to do. But the thing is with these is that we carry them into our adult lives and we don't know. Most of the time we don't know that they're playing out because they're so deeply unconscious and they're so deeply on guard and keeping us safe that oftentimes it's hard to really penetrate those and deconstruct them so we can free ourselves up and start living more in the now. And it's these now moments and being present in the now that, you hear all the spiritual teachers, it's like, yeah, just be in the now, be in the now, be in the now. And part of that being in the now is because we need to be able to face what comes up from the unconscious with empowerment. And it can literally be, something can strike or something's triggered, or you get in an argument and there's a contraction. Something in you has contracted mentally, emotionally, whatever the case, physically. And when it comes up, we contract because that's the mechanism that we've just always grown up with as human beings. When you start to study and recognize what your shadow patterns are, you start to begin to work out why it's happening. Because these charges are starting to come up from our beings, and they want to show us something. It's like a past trauma or a past hurt that we've shut down from those earlier years, and it just wants to be present. It just wants to be met in the now, so we can expand, open up, and breathe through it and transmute it in a beautiful way. But when we're not present in the moment, when a trigger occurs, we reorient ourselves, or we distract ourselves, or we deny it, or we just move. And that's why we can't sit still and we can't sit alone, because all of our stuff will come up. So we keep busy, busy, busy. And when you become more present in the now, it just gets easier. And when you start loading your system up with the information that's in these gene keys, you start actually realizing that, oh man, this shadow, I've got this shadow of conflict, or I've got this shadow of turbulence. we don't want to feel these shadow patterns. So we push them down, we push them out. So they're disowned parts of ourselves, because who wants to live all their days in conflict and turbulence and all these lower frequency vibrations, right? But they need to be acknowledged and they need to be felt. If we want to anchor into our gifts this lifetime and anchor into our true vocation and our true purpose, we have to acknowledge these shadow patterns that we're playing out in our realities. And there's no way around it. Even though we're built to actually navigate these and keep them at bay, what the Gene Keys, a system like the Gene Keys or any shadow work that you do, it allows us to penetrate and understand the shadow, so we're not pushing it away anymore. We're actually holding it there, and it's like, okay, I can own this shadow. I can bring this shadow back. And when we do, that's where the alchemical mutations begin. And that's when we start noticing the shadow, meeting the shadow in the moment, and then transmuting that shadow and transcending into our higher frequencies of these archetypes that are playing out. So when you're looking at there's a Gene Keys, because there's a majority that are new, we have a unique hologenetic profile or archetypal blueprint that was stamped into being through our conception and the exact time of our birth. And it shows which archetypes we're here to play out this lifetime, which shadows we're here to play out this lifetime, but which gifts we're here to play out this lifetime. And when you're looking at your hologenetic profile, you're looking at your blueprint and your gifts and themes that you're here to play out this lifetime. It's what life wants you to have as gifts so you can gift it to humanity. And so knowing our shadows and knowing what these shadow patterns are, it gives us a chance to drop into the shadow, to own the shadow and step in more of our gifts. And it's an amazing system. It's a living transmission in that if you spend time with perseverance to read, or I'd recommend reading or listening to a Gene Key a day, because if you do that, the transmission's going to come and you're going to fill your consciousness with this transmission, and it's going to land literally in your physical body and in your reality, and it's going to open things up, and a new reality is literally going to open in front of you, because you're going to understand that these defensive mechanisms, they're actually stopping us from seeing the truth of any reality, and they're actually stopping us from living in the now. Because if we're fully in the now, we're embracing all of these things that are coming up through our bodies without the stories that the mind will jump in and tell us. Oh, it's their fault. It's like, or making excuses, deluding and defending ourselves that it's a certain way, because that's the mind's mental defense mechanism that was created in the third 7-year cycle. It's just keeping us safe. But what it's doing, it's overriding the emotional body so we can't feel. So even when a trigger goes off, it's like the mind will crank up, because it's getting busy, because the busier it gets and the more that you buy into that, the more you're coming away from what you're actually there to feel. So if you can get under that story, get under whatever's happening in the now and meet whatever's there under the stories, which is so much easier said than done, that's where the nuggets are. That's where the gold is hidden in these shadows. And that's where we start taking our power back. Because these shadows are pushed down there and out there, because we don't want to feel them. We just want to head for the higher frequencies, and rightly so. But the real depth, our real grounding, and our real anchoring into our bodies, it all comes from understanding our shadows. And it can be seen as, we're mining away, we're digging away at these shadows so we can inhabit more of our physical bodies. And when we're inhabiting more of our physical bodies, we can be more present with what is now. And when we're inhabiting more of our physical bodies, we've got more grounding. So our energy is connected to the earth, which is so important for this work. Where to go. Thank you. And so that's what it is. It's basically, you've got the importance of the Gene Keys are getting more and more, they're expanding out into the collective in a huge way now. 4 years ago when I started doing events and facilitating some of the keys and introducing the transmission, it was a case of explaining what they are, which even after all this time, it's easier said than done, because it's such a vast and sacred and ancient piece of work. But now it's more and more people are starting to get on board and starting to be activated and coming into the transmission and really understanding these archetypes. Because these archetypes are playing out in our realities, and they have been playing out since we were born. They're playing out now, and they'll all be playing out for the rest of this incarnation. And all we're doing when you're looking at your hologenetic profile is basically, they're your themes that you're here to master and thrive in. So you understand all of the words and the numbers, and don't get overwhelmed if you download your profile and you don't know what the hell is going on. Don't be overwhelmed when you look at the size of the book because it's like this. But you don't read the whole book because that would, I don't know what would happen. I haven't read the whole book from front to back because you'd burn out for sure. You'd probably get activated, but yeah, it's not the way to go. So get your profile and get your specific archetypes and feel where you want to go. Feel where you want to go and read and start to build a relationship with each word in that profile. Because oftentimes there can be a word and our conditioned meaning of the word, it doesn't have anything to do with what that word and that frequency and that linguistic portal into our DNA actually means for us. But once we start understanding these things, once we start befriending the shadow and bringing it back into ourselves, it's like, wow, that's actually all right. I don't have to fear that because it's all fear-based. And every one of the 64 shadows is a victim state of being. And we all play the victim. All play the victim all the time, and we're all wounded. We come into this world with these wounds and hurts, but they might have hurt at the time, and yes, they did hurt at the time. But we're able to actually lean back into those hurts. We're able to understand what's actually coming up, and when we're meeting it in the moment, it might just be something that's coming up in the moment to release out of the body. It's another story from another time that just wants to be acknowledged, felt, and released so you can be free and so you can inhabit more of your physical body and have more peace in your life. And when we're releasing these feelings and emotions that have been trapped for so long, sometimes the mind wants to attach a story to it, but it's not about that. It can just you can attach a story to it and bring the story back and start reliving it, or start to contaminate that actual process. So just meeting it in the now, oftentimes, and it can shift it. It can shift it really rapidly because it's just this unloading process. Because we've just been so busy all of this incarnation pushing it down and out. We deny the shadow. We repress the shadow. We avoid the shadow. We reject the shadow. We delude ourselves that we have no shadows. We delude ourselves that we aren't wounded. But the more real that we get with these shadow patterns and the more real that we get with these wounds of ours and tend to them and give ourselves what we need, whether it's gentleness or humor or kindness or nurture or whatever the case may be, we start knowing what our medicine is and what's going to allow us to actually drop more into our physical bodies but take more ownership and accountability for what's going on in our realities without playing the blame game, without playing out the cycles and the defensive mechanisms that's always kept us safe, but has always kept the shadow at bay. I don't know how long I've got left, but yeah, so the importance of the Venus, it's like I travel the world doing this and have done for 4 years, and a lot of people, it's like, I got my gene keys done. And they've had a reading or a session with someone, but please know that no one can do your gene keys for you at all. There are ambassadors of the wisdom now on the planet that are embodied, and it means that they've been through a 9-month initiation process and been embodied in the wisdom for 2 or 3 years, which is really important for anyone who you're going to go to for facilitation of the wisdom, because it means that they've done the Venus work. And the Venus is the heart of the transmission. And Venus is going to bring up a lot because it's going into the emotional realm and the ways we shut down and all that sort of thing, but it's where the real work is. So I come across a lot of people. It's like, yeah, I'm doing my gene keys, and that's great, and I love it, and I get off on the fact that it's coming alive, and more people are like, yeah, gene keys, 2 minutes, and but please know that keep penetrating into the Venus, because at the level of the gene keys, it's like even if you've read your gene keys and you've brought it alive to some extent in your reality, you have not even scratched the surface of the transmission until you've hit the Venus stream. And when you do, the empowerment and the magic and the synchronicity and all of the good stuff comes from that space. So that's good to keep in mind that the deeper work is there, and there's even unconscious mechanisms to avoid going that deep in a way. But know that if you do push through those uncomfortabilities and you do start leaning into the shadow more and more and more, the empowerment is beyond anything that I've experienced. And I've been on this a really intense trajectory of personal development for over 10 years and throwing myself into every different system. You got the breath work, the meditation, all that sort of stuff. But this just takes it to another level with persistence. And if you bring it alive in your reality by penetrating the transmission, it will come alive and change your reality. And it happens every single time. And I don't say that lightly. We're sitting on this ancient sacred wisdom that has been around and waiting to come alive and be activated for 5,000 years. It's a deeply special thing. And these are the themes and the archetypes that we're here to play out in this lifetime. And tuning into them will create such magic in your reality and such beauty in your relationships, because we're actually able to keep our heart open even when it wants to shut. And when it comes alive, you'll know what I'm talking about. So thank you for listening. Thank you.